Pope Francis has died.
Pope Francis has died.
Breaking news now on Pope Francis has died aged 88.
Pope Francis just passed away, and the future of the Vatican has never been more uncertain. Behind closed doors, powerful cardinals are locked in a silent war over the future of the Church. The late Pope pushed for controversial modern changes during his time, but now the traditionalists are ready to take it all back. However, rumors of a successor have begun circulating. Did Francis secretly name his successor? Who's really pulling the strings? Join us on this episode as we uncover the face of the next pope. The final days of a modern pope. In the early hours of Monday, April 21st, Pope Francis, the first pope from Latin America, passed away at the age of 88. Cardinal Kevin Farrell shared the sad news through the Vatican's official TV channel and a heartfelt video message. At 76, the late pope was ordained, and initially, doctors said he was in good health, despite having had part of one lung removed when he was younger. That surgery didn't seem to affect his daily life much, though it made him more vulnerable to chest infections, especially in the cold seasons. Over the years, Pope Francis's health has gradually deteriorated. He often caught the flu or bronchitis in the winter. He also dealt with painful knee issues and sciatica, which made it hard for him to walk. He began using a cane, a walker, or occasionally even a wheelchair. In 2021, there were rumors that he might resign, but he denied them and continued his duties. In 2022, due to knee pain, the Pope had to cancel planned visits to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and South Sudan. The following year, in March 2023, he was hospitalized with a lung infection, but recovered in time to lead the Easter Vigil in April. Then, in June, he had surgery for a hernia and admitted that his health was slowing him down. Still, he continued to lead the Church, earning praise for showing that even a pope could live and serve with a disability. In February 2025, Pope Francis was admitted again to Rome's Gemelli Hospital, this time with bronchitis. But his condition quickly worsened. He developed a severe infection in his lungs and pneumonia in both lungs. The situation became critical to the point that he had to receive blood transfusions, high-flow oxygen, and was placed on a ventilator for several days, during which he experienced 2 major breathing failures. After weeks of treatment, he finally got better and left the hospital on March 23rd. He even greeted the public from his balcony that same day and planned to rest for 2 months, taking on fewer duties while recovering at home in Vatican City. Then, on April 6th, Pope Francis made a brief public appearance for the first time since his hospitalization. However, his last public appearance was on Easter Sunday, April 20th, 2025, when he stood before a massive crowd at St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. Just a day later, on the morning of Easter Monday, April 21st, the Pope passed away peacefully in his Vatican residence. Doctors confirmed that a stroke had led to a total heart and circulation failure that couldn't be reversed. The will that the Pope had written on June 29, 2022, he asked to be buried at the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, not in grand halls, but specifically in a simple burial spot between the Chapel of Salus Populi Romani and the Sforza Chapel of the Basilica. How the Church prepares for a new era. When a pope passes away, an ancient tradition begins, one that marks the end of an era and the start of a search for a new leader. The first person to officially confirm the Pope's death is a senior church figure called the Camerlengo, essentially the Vatican's caretaker. In a quiet and respectful moment, he calls out the Pope's real name, the one he was given at birth, not the name he chose when he became Pope. If there is no answer, the Camerlengo announces a simple yet powerful phrase in Latin, sede vacante, which means, the seat is empty. Next, the Camerlengo removes the Pope's special ring, called the Ring of the Fisherman. This ring, along with the papal seal, is later destroyed in front of the cardinals. Long ago, this was done to prevent the creation of counterfeit documents. Today, it symbolizes the end of that Pope's time leading the Church. What follows is a special period known as the sede vacante, during which the church is without a pope. During this time, a group of church leaders called the College of Cardinals takes charge of the basics, but no one can make big decisions until a new pope is chosen. The Camerlengo and 3 other cardinals, picked randomly every few days, are in charge of daily matters. One is a bishop, one is a priest, and one is a deacon. Their job is to ensure everything runs smoothly and that all plans for the election of a new pope remain secret and fair. One of their first big tasks is to plan the pope's funeral. It usually happens 4 to 6 days after his death, giving time for people to come from all over the world to say goodbye. The church also enters a period of mourning that lasts 9 days, known as the Novem Dialis. Meanwhile, the cardinals prepare for the next big step, the conclave, the secret meeting where they choose a new pope. It's usually held about 15 days after the pope dies, but can be delayed up to 20 days if needed, so cardinals from far away can arrive in time. And just like that, the church begins the journey toward its next chapter, guided by age-old rituals and deep faith. The conclave. The process of choosing a pope, known as a papal conclave, has never been a straightforward one, and it took nearly 2,000 years to evolve into its current form. In the early days, long before a formal voting system was established, the people of Rome and local priests would simply cheer for the person they wanted to be the next bishop. It was all about public support and loud voices, not ballots and rules. However, things changed in 1059 when the church established the College of Cardinals, a select group of senior priests responsible for electing the pope. However, they often took a long time to select the new pope. In fact, there was one moment in the 1200s when it took almost 3 years to agree on a new pope. People got fed up. In one dramatic case, the people of the city of Viterbo locked the cardinals inside the building, cut off their food supply, and only passed bread and water through a window. And when that didn't work fast enough, they tore the roof off the building to make the cardinals uncomfortable, all just to expedite the process, and it worked. In 1274, Pope Gregory X said, "Enough is enough," and laid down strict rules to stop these endless delays. He created a set of rules called Ubi Periculum. From then on, all cardinals were confined together, with no private rooms and only 2 helpers each unless they were ill. After 3 days of voting with no result, their meals were cut down to 1 dish a day. After 5 more days, just bread and water. But not everyone liked these strict rules. A few years later, Pope Adrian V expelled them. Then, after another long delay in electing a pope, Celestine V brought the strict rules back in 1294. Clearly, the church was still in the process of figuring things out. As the years passed, more popes added to the rulebook. In 1621, Pope Gregory XV made it official that a candidate needed 2/3 of the votes to win. No more games. And no more voting for yourself, a trick some cardinals used before. The following year, he also outlined the procedures for conducting the ceremonies. By 1904, Pope Pius X compiled all the existing rules, made some revisions, and created a comprehensive document to guide the process. Later popes followed suit. Each time a conclave approached, tweaks were made to make the process smoother, fairer, and more secure. Where do these elections happen? Since the 14th century, the tradition has remained chiefly in Rome, and since 1929, they've been officially held within Vatican City. These days, the cardinals meet in the Sistine Chapel, surrounded by centuries-old art, as they decide the future of the church. Today, the Catholic Church is getting ready for possibly the biggest gathering of cardinals ever. Out of 939 cardinals expected to be part of it, only 125 will be allowed to vote. The rest are over the age limit. Who can actually become pope? Technically, any baptized Catholic man could be picked, but in real life, it almost always ends up being one of the cardinals. Power and influence still matter as well. Cardinals from Europe and the Americas have traditionally had the most impact in determining who is chosen, but Pope Francis wanted to shake things up. When he became Pope in 2013, more than half of the voters were European. Since then, he has expanded the group of cardinals to a more global level. Europe now accounts for only 40% of the voters. North America's numbers have dipped a bit too. Meanwhile, Asia-Pacific and Sub-Saharan Africa have gained more voice. Asia-Pacific cardinals now make up 17 of the vote, almost double what it was in 2013. Africa's share has grown too, although both Africa and Latin America still have fewer cardinals than they should, given their Catholic populations. When it's time to vote for a new pope, the cardinals cast their votes up to 4 times a day. If no one gets enough support, the ballots are burned with a special mix that sends black smoke into the sky, telling the world, "Not yet." This continues until someone finally secures the necessary votes. When that happens, the smoke turns white, signaling to everyone that a new pope has been chosen. After that, the new pope picks a name and steps onto the famous balcony at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. There, he waves to the crowd, gives his first blessing, and officially begins his journey as the leader of the Catholic Church. Possible successors to Pope Francis. Predicting who will be the next pope is no easy feat. In 2013, no one could have guessed that Jorge Mario Bergoglio would become Pope Francis. Currently, a few names are sparking the most chatter as potential successors. 70-year-old Pietro Parolin is often seen as a steady choice, one who would likely maintain many of Pope Francis's policies. As the Vatican's Secretary of State since 2013, Parolin has been deeply involved in diplomacy, particularly with countries such as China and nations in the Middle East. He's known as a reliable figure in international relations, trusted by world leaders. However, his critics have been vocal, especially after his controversial 2018 agreement with China over the appointment of bishops, which some viewed as a compromise with the communist government. While some view him as a pragmatic diplomat, others describe him as a modernist who prioritizes diplomacy over deeply rooted church beliefs. Supporters, however, see him as a peace advocate with idealistic goals. If elected as pope, 76-year-old Peter Turkson would make history as the first black pope in centuries. He's an outspoken figure on key issues, including climate change, poverty, and economic justice, while also upholding traditional Catholic values on topics such as marriage and the priesthood. Though his views on LGBTQ+ issues have softened over time, particularly in light of harsh laws in parts of Africa, he remains conservative in some areas. Turkson has also tackled corruption and human rights issues, making him a key voice for reform. 72-year-old Peter Erdo is a strong conservative candidate who has been a staunch defender of traditional Catholic teachings. If he were to be chosen, it would mark a sharp departure from Pope Francis's more progressive direction. Erdo is regarded as a brilliant intellectual, admired for his cultural depth and legal expertise. He was supported by the late Cardinal George Pell, who saw him as someone who could restore order and discipline in the Vatican. Erdo's views on migration have sparked controversy, especially after he sided with Hungary's nationalist Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, against Francis's call for churches to welcome refugees. 69-year-old Matteo Zuppi is another figure closely associated with Pope Francis's vision for the Church, with a particular focus on serving the poor and marginalized. Appointed a cardinal by Francis in 2019, Zuppi is seen as progressive, especially in his views on same-sex relationships. A key figure in Francis's peace efforts, he has served as the Vatican's envoy to Ukraine, visiting both Moscow and Kyiv to promote peace. His meetings with influential figures, such as Russian Patriarch Kirill and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, demonstrate his commitment to bridging divides and promoting peace in the face of conflict. At 59, José Tolentino de Mendonça is the youngest of the group, bringing fresh ideas that excite some but worry others. He's open to modern discussions about same-sex relationships and women's roles in the Church, sticking close to Pope Francis's belief that faith must evolve with the times. But some cardinals might hesitate to back him. After all, choosing a younger pope means waiting decades for another shot at the top job. Then there's Mario Gretsch, who was once seen as a staunch traditionalist until Pope Francis's election prompted him to rethink his stance. Now, he supports female deacons and has even scolded European leaders for turning away migrants. His critics call him a flip-flopper, but his defenders say he's proof that people, and the Church, can grow. Pierbattista Pizzaballa, the Vatican's man in Jerusalem, isn't just a diplomat. He's a risk-taker. When Hamas took children hostage, he volunteered to be exchanged. Months later, he walked into Gaza on a mission of peace. He keeps quiet on controversial topics, but his actions speak louder than words. If elected, he'd likely continue Pope Francis's path, but with a focus on healing divides in one of the world's most troubled regions. And then there's Robert Sarah, the unshakable traditionalist. At 79, he's the oldest contender, a man who once openly defied Pope Francis by publishing a book in defense of priestly celibacy. He warns against modern gender ideology and Islamic extremism with equal fire. If chosen, he'd make history as the first black pope in centuries, but his leadership could turn the Church back toward its conservative roots. Behind the scenes, there are rumors that Pope Francis himself may be quietly influencing the vote. The rumored successor. In 2019, a significant event occurred in the Catholic Church, but few people realized its importance at the time. Pope Francis bestowed upon now 67-year-old Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle one of the highest titles in the Church, and now, years later, the world is beginning to see why. Tagle's journey has been fast and impressive. Before moving to Rome in 2020, he was the Archbishop of Manila for nearly a decade. He had already caught people's attention at a major youth meeting in 2018. Soon after, Pope Francis made him the head of a major department that oversees the Church's missionary work. And even before that, Tagle had been leading Caritas Internationalis, a prominent Catholic charity organization that assists people worldwide. In the Church, cardinals are split into 3 levels. The highest level is called cardinal bishops. Typically, only 6 cardinals receive this title, and they are assigned control of critical areas around Rome known as suburbicarian sees. Eastern Catholic leaders can also become cardinal bishops if they're made cardinals. But Pope Francis decided to do things differently. When he promoted Tagle, he didn't give him one of those historic areas. Instead, he gave him full authority through a special letter, breaking tradition and making it clear he wanted to change how things were done. He had done something similar before in 2018, adding new cardinal bishops without assigning them to specific places. With Tagle and Cardinal Stella joining the group, the number of cardinal bishops has grown to 14. So, why is everyone talking about Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle? Tagle isn't just another name in red robes. He's one of the few who truly gets what Pope Francis has been trying to do. Despite being a loving and caring leader, Pope Francis didn't just face outside pressure. Some storms he stirred up himself. His efforts to welcome LGBTQ+ Catholics and push the Church in a more modern direction angered many conservatives in the Church. His biggest challenge came in 2018, when a major mistake in handling a well-known abuse case in Chile came back to haunt him. The scandal, hidden for years by past popes, burst into public view, and this time, all eyes were on Francis. Through it all, Pope Francis had only a small circle of allies who honestly shared his vision. One of them was Cardinal Tagle. Their bond runs deep, shaped by trust, shared values, and a dream of a church that's more kind, more open, and more involved in the real struggles people face every day. As the leader of Caritas Internationalis, Tagle has spent years assisting people in need, including refugees, the poor, and families affected by disasters. He doesn't just speak about mercy and justice, he shows it through his actions. That's why many see him as the natural next pope. He's not only competent and experienced, he's also down to earth, warm, and easy to talk to. Whether he's speaking at a major event or sharing a meal with those who have nothing, He makes people feel seen and valued. But Tagle's rise isn't by chance. Pope Francis has been preparing him. Their values align almost perfectly. They help the poor, stand up for the forgotten, and focus on issues such as climate change and migration that affect the entire planet. Now, as the Church stands at a crossroads, the next pope will help shape its path for decades to come. If that person is Tagle, many believe Francis's vision will live on, with a leader who carries the same fire, compassion, and global outlook. Still, nothing is guaranteed. Tagle has big shoes to fill, and not everyone in the Vatican agrees with Francis's way of doing things. The real question is, can Tagle step out of his mentor's shadow and prove that he's not just the student, but a leader in his own right? One of the biggest challenges Cardinal Tagle has faced so far is handling the Church's relationship with China. Pope Francis has worked diligently to maintain delicate ties with the Chinese Communist Party, and Tagle has been cautious in his approach, refraining from commenting on the situation. While this aligns with the Vatican's diplomatic objectives, it has drawn criticism from some who believe the Church is compromising too much. Given Tagle's background and the tensions between the Philippines and China, many expected him to speak out more. His silence on the issue has left people wondering how he would handle other challenging political matters if he were to become pope. As head of the Dicastery for Evangelization, Tagle played a key role in shaping the Church's outreach efforts, including its dealings with China. Although he wasn't directly part of the controversial Vatican-China agreement, his position brought him close to the issue. This has led some to question whether his cautious diplomacy is a smart move or if he's too afraid to stand up to powerful forces. As the race for the papacy intensifies, Tagle's future hinges on whether he can address these concerns and demonstrate his readiness to lead the Church through its most challenging times. His charm, deep faith, and dedication to serving others are evident, but they may not be enough to sustain him in the long run. War within the Church. This upcoming conclave might just be the most watched in history, not just because it's important, but because the whole world is plugged into the internet. Every move will be under the spotlight, every whisper will be heard, and every choice will stir emotions. However, the big question remains: will the future of the Church be shaped by modern thinkers or by those who adhere to traditional values? Either way, the battle between the two sides is expected to be intense. This isn't the first time the Church has seen drama. Way back in the 9th and 10th centuries, the Church in Italy was engulfed in chaos. Popes came and went like seasons. In just over 30 years, about 24 different popes wore the crown, and during one stretch, there was a new pope almost every year. Much of this was driven by power-hungry local leaders who were always scheming behind the scenes. One of the most fascinating figures from that time was Formosus. He began as a bishop and later became a prominent papal envoy. He did such a good job in Bulgaria that their king wanted him to become archbishop, but the pope at the time said no. Church rules didn't allow bishops to take charge of more than one area. Formosus traveled extensively, even to the powerful courts of Europe. However, things took a dark turn when he clashed with Pope John VIII. Accused of trying to take over the papacy and abandoning his duties, Formosus was kicked out of the Church. He had to flee for his safety. Years later, it is said that he begged for forgiveness and promised never to become a bishop again. But not everyone agrees on what really happened. Some say he was forgiven. Others say he stayed excommunicated. When Pope John VIII passed in late 882, Formosus could finally breathe. The tension that had haunted him for years was gone, and he quietly returned to his position as Bishop of Porto. Things stayed calm for a while, until 891, when he was chosen as Pope. But peace doesn't last long in stories like this. Even though John VIII was long gone, the grudge followed Formosus into the grave. Years after his passing, the new Pope, Stephen VI, convened one of the strangest trials in Church history, the Cadaver Synod. That's right, they dug up Formosus's corpse, dressed it in papal robes, set it on a throne, and held a full trial. Stephen, likely pushed by powerful enemies, accused the lifeless pope of stealing the papal seat, lying under oath, and breaking promises he had made years earlier. Formosus, of course, couldn't defend himself. He had been buried for months. But why all this madness? Behind the bizarre trial was a dangerous game of politics. Formosus had once crowned Lambert of Spoleto as emperor, but soon after, he switched sides. He asked Arnulf, a Frankish king from the north, to invade Italy and take the crown instead. Arnulf tried, but his first attempt failed. Formosus tried again, and this time, Arnulf made it to Rome. Formosus crowned him emperor, a big slap in the face to Lambert. Soon after that, both Arnulf and Formosus passed. Chaos followed. Pope Boniface VI replaced Formosus, but passed away after just 2 weeks. Then came Pope Stephen VI. At the same time, Lambert and his powerful mother, Empress Angeltrude, stormed into Rome, angry, powerful, and looking for payback. That's when the Cadaver Synod happened. Most historians now believe it was all about revenge. Lambert sought to erase Formosus's legacy and prove himself the rightful emperor. Forcing Pope Stephen to put a corpse on trial was his way of rewriting history and getting even. Formosus was found guilty of taking the papal throne out of ambition. His papal robes were ripped off, the 3 fingers he once used to bless people were cut off, and everything he had done as pope was declared invalid, including the ordination of Stephen himself. His body was tossed into a common grave, then dug up again, tied with weights, and dumped into the Tiber River like trash. But that horrifying act backfired. People in Rome were outraged. Many believed Formosus's corpse had floated back to shore and was performing miracles. The anger boiled over. A mob rose, threw Stephen in prison, and not long after, he was strangled to death in his cell. The church quickly attempted to rectify the situation. In December 897, a new pope, Theodore II, held a council that cancelled everything the Cadaver Synod had done. Formosus was cleared, his body pulled from the river, and reburied in St. Peter's Basilica with full honors. A year later, Pope John IX took it even further. He held 2 major councils, one in Rome and one in Ravenna, that effectively erased the Council of Cadaver from history. The records were destroyed, 7 cardinals involved were excommunicated, and the church declared once and for all, never again could a corpse be put on trial. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.